The story of John Davison Rockefeller is not merely a biography of the wealthiest American of all time, it is the origin story of the modern corporate world, a narrative that charts the creation of an economic architecture so pervasive and so deeply embedded in the fabric of global capitalism that its basic principles continue to dictate the rules of market competition, corporate structure, and even philanthropic endeavor more than a century later. To understand Rockefeller is to understand the deliberate and systematic construction of a framework designed for one purpose: the elimination of uncertainty. In an era of chaotic, volatile, and fiercely competitive American industry, Rockefeller did not just build a company, he engineered a system, a complex self-reinforcing mechanism of control that sought to tame the anarchy of the free market and replace it with a predictable, orderly, and immensely profitable hierarchy. This system, perfected through Standard Oil, was built on a foundation of relentless efficiency, radical vertical and horizontal integration, and the ruthless neutralization of competitors. Yet its most enduring and controversial legacy lies in its legal and financial innovations. The trust, and later the holding company, which became the blueprints for corporate organization worldwide, creating entities of such scale and power that they could challenge governments and reshape societies. The system Rockefeller created is one we can never truly escape, because it is the very system of modern industrial and post-industrial capitalism itself, a world where corporate entities operate on a global scale, where market dominance is pursued through logistical and data-driven advantages as much as through product quality, and where the concentration of private wealth carries an influence that permeates every layer of the economy and polity. His journey from a frugal bookkeeper in Cleveland to the master of an unprecedented industrial empire is a tale of visionary ambition, iron discipline, and a philosophical belief in order that bordered on the providential, a belief that he was destined to bring efficiency to a wasteful and chaotic industry, no matter the cost to those who stood in his way. The man who would build this system was born in 1839 in Richford, New York, to a father, William Devil Bill Rockefeller, a traveling con man who sold dubious elixirs and was frequently absent, and a devout, straight-laced mother, Eliza. This contrasting parental influence, the flamboyant, unscrupulous charlatan and the pious, disciplined Baptist, would forge a character of profound complexity. From his mother and his Baptist faith, Rockefeller internalized a deep-seated discipline, a thrift that bordered on obsession and a belief that wealth was a gift from God, provided it was accumulated and used responsibly. From his father, whether through emulation or reaction, he learned the arts of negotiation, risk-taking, and a cold, pragmatic assessment of human nature. His first serious job as a bookkeeper and clerk at the mercantile firm of Hewitt and Tuttle in Cleveland was his university. Here, he did not merely record numbers, he absorbed the very bloodstream of commerce. He learned to analyze costs with a preternatural precision, to understand the flow of commodities, and to appreciate the power of credit and the critical importance of a sterling reputation for paying debts on time. This meticulous attention to detail, this worship of efficiency, would become the cornerstone of his future empire. He saw waste as a sin, both moral and commercial, and inefficiency as a challenge to be systematically eliminated. Before he ever entered the oil business, Rockefeller was already a systems thinker, and his first successful venture as a commission merchant in produce gave him the capital and the confidence to seek a larger stage. That stage presented itself in the chaotic, burgeoning oil industry of northwestern Pennsylvania, where, in 1859, Edwin Drake had proven that petroleum could be drilled for in commercial quantities, sparking a frenzy akin to a gold rush. The early oil industry was the antithesis of everything Rockefeller stood for. It was a spectacle of spectacular waste and volatility. In the oil-rich regions around Titusville, Pennsylvania, the landscape was a forest of wooden derricks, with wells drilled haphazardly, often gushing crude that would flood the fields or be stored in open, leaking ponds. Refineries, the operations that turned crude oil into valuable kerosene for lighting, were small, primitive, and dangerously inefficient, with many operating at a loss. The price of crude oil swung wildly based on new discoveries and overproduction. Boomtowns would spring up overnight and just as quickly turn into ghost towns. It was an industry screaming for order, and Rockefeller, who entered the refining business in Cleveland in 1863 with partners Maurice Clark and Samuel Andrews, saw this chaos not as a barrier, but as the ultimate opportunity. While others were content to ride the boom and bust cycles, Rockefeller was determined to break the cycle itself. His refineries, from the very beginning, were models of efficiency. He insisted on building his own barrel-making facilities, ensuring quality and controlling cost down to the last nail and hoop of wood. He bought his own timber tracks and leased his own wagons. He obsessively found uses for the byproducts of the refining process that others simply dumped into the Cuyahoga River, selling one byproduct as axle grease, another as petroleum jelly, and yet another as paraffin wax. This was not just cost-cutting, It was a philosophical crusade against waste, and it gave him a crucial cost advantage over his less disciplined competitors. He could make a profit on kerosene where others lost money, allowing him to survive the industry's inevitable downturns and emerge stronger each time. However, efficiency alone could not guarantee dominance. Rockefeller's true genius lay in his understanding that to control his own destiny, he had to control the destiny of the entire industry. This led to his masterstroke, the creation of a monopoly. In 1870, he formed the Standard Oil Company of Ohio, and with the financial backing of shrewd capitalists, he embarked on a campaign of consolidation that was as methodical as it was merciless. His strategy was twofold: horizontal and vertical integration. Horizontally, he set out to buy out or crush every competing refinery in Cleveland and then across the nation. He would approach rivals with a stark choice: sell out to Standard Oil at a fair price or be driven into bankruptcy. This was not an empty threat. Rockefeller leveraged his company's growing size to secure secret rebates from the railroads, which were desperate for the large, consistent shipping volumes that Standard Oil promised. While his competitors paid the published freight rates, Standard Oil received not only a secret discount, but often a drawback, a kickback on the freight that their competitors paid. This gave Standard Oil an insurmountable cost advantage. If a competitor refused to sell, Rockefeller would unleash a price war in that local market, slashing prices below cost until the rival was forced to capitulate. This practice, known as predatory pricing, was devastatingly effective. One by one, the independent refineries fell, either absorbed into the Standard Oil empire or shuttered forever. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled approximately 90% of the refining capacity in the United States. It was no longer just a company, it was the trust, a colossus that bestrode the national economy. Vertical integration was the other pillar of his control. Not content with dominating refining, Rockefeller moved to control every step of the production process, from the wellhead to the consumer's lamp. He acquired vast tracts of oil-producing land, ensuring a steady supply of crude. He built a vast network of pipelines, making his transportation network less reliant on the unpredictable railroads. He created a sophisticated distribution and marketing apparatus, with tank cars, storage depots, and a fleet of delivery wagons that put Standard Oil kerosene in every general store and pharmacy in the country. This vertical control allowed him to squeeze profits at every stage and to gather unparalleled market intelligence, knowing exactly where oil was being produced, how much it cost to transport, and where it was being sold. The entire oil industry was being transformed from a chaotic, competitive market into a single, centrally planned machine, with Rockefeller as its chief engineer. The system was designed for stability and profit, and it worked magnificently. The price of kerosene fell dramatically for consumers, a fact Rockefeller and his supporters would forever point to as proof of the benefits of his monopoly. But this came at the cost of competition, innovation, and economic democracy. The system was closed, rigged in favor of its architect, and it created a template for market dominance that industrialists in steel, railroads, and finance would quickly emulate. To manage this sprawling empire, Rockefeller and his lawyers, most notably Samuel C. T. Dodd, engineered a revolutionary legal structure, the Standard Oil Trust. Created in 1882, the trust was a legal innovation designed to overcome state laws that prohibited one corporation from owning stock in another or from operating outside its home state. Under the trust agreement, the shareholders of the dozens of companies that comprised Standard Oil transferred their stock to a board of 9 trustees, including Rockefeller. In exchange, they received trust certificates. This centralized control in the hands of the trustees, who could now direct the operations of the entire conglomerate as a single entity, while maintaining the legal fiction that the constituent companies were independent. The Standard Oil Trust was a corporate superorganism, a legal blueprint for the giant national corporations that would come to define the American economy. It was the ultimate expression of Rockefeller's desire for order and control, a way to impose a single will upon a vast and complex industrial landscape. The trust became so synonymous with massive, unaccountable corporate power that it entered the popular lexicon as a pejorative, and the movement to break up these entities became known as antitrust. This legal innovation is perhaps one of Rockefeller's most enduring legacies. The modern multinational corporation, with its complex web of subsidiaries and holding companies, is a direct descendant of the Standard Oil Trust model. The rise of Standard Oil inevitably provoked a powerful backlash. To the small businessmen it crushed, the competitors it bankrupted, and the journalists who investigated its practices, Rockefeller was not a great organizer, but a robber baron, a monopolist who had corrupted the free market and amassed dangerous, undemocratic power. The most searing indictment came from Ida Tarbell, a pioneering investigative journalist whose father had been an independent oil producer driven out of business by Standard Oil's tactics. Her series of articles in McClure's magazine, later published as The History of the Standard Oil Company in 1904, was a masterpiece of muckraking journalism. Tarbell did not merely criticize the company's size. She meticulously documented its ruthless methods, the secret rebates, the espionage, the predatory pricing, the political manipulation. She painted a portrait of Rockefeller as a cold, cunning, and hypocritical figure who preached Baptist morality while practicing corporate piracy. Her work crystallized public opinion and provided the ammunition that progressive politicians needed to take action. The political response was the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, and while its initial enforcement was weak, it established the principle that the federal government had a role in preserving competition. The pressure mounted for decades until, in 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down its landmark decision in Standard Oil Commerce of New Jersey versus United States. The court found that Standard Oil was an unreasonable monopoly and restraint of trade and ordered its dissolution into 34 separate independent companies. The legend goes that Rockefeller, upon hearing the news, calmly told a golf partner, "Buy Standard Oil." It was brilliant advice. Freed from the shadow of the trust and the constant legal battles, the value of these baby standards, which included companies that would become Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, Amoco, and others, soared, making Rockefeller richer than ever. The final act of Rockefeller's life was as consequential as his business career, for it was here that he sought to systematize the distribution of his wealth, just as he had systematized its accumulation. After the dissolution of Standard Oil, he dedicated himself entirely to philanthropy. But this was not simple charity. It was large-scale scientific philanthropy, designed to identify and eradicate the root causes of problems. Advised by Frederick T. Gates, a brilliant Baptist minister, Rockefeller approached giving with the same strategic, efficiency-minded rigor he applied to business. He did not just give alms, he invested in institutions that could generate perpetual good. In 1913, he established the Rockefeller Foundation with a charter to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. His philanthropy was breathtaking in its scope and impact. He funded the creation of the University of Chicago, transforming it into a world-class research institution virtually overnight. He revolutionized American medicine by funding the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, now Rockefeller University, which played a pivotal role in advancing germ theory and training a generation of leading scientists. His General Education Board poured millions into improving public education and eradicating hookworm disease in the American South. This philanthropic model, the large-scale foundation managed by experts and dedicated to tackling systemic issues, became the template for modern billionaires, from Bill Gates to Warren Buffett. In creating the system, Rockefeller extended his influence from the economic sphere into the very realms of science, education, and public health, ensuring that his legacy would be felt not just in the boardroom, but in the laboratory, the classroom, and the clinic. It was the final piece of the system, a mechanism to perpetually shape society according to a particular vision of progress and order. In conclusion, John D. Rockefeller's life and work represent a pivotal chapter in the history of capitalism. He was the architect of a system that we can never escape because he helped define the very environment in which modern economic life operates. The principles he championed, ruthless efficiency, vertical and horizontal integration, the pursuit of market dominance, and the use of legal innovation to consolidate control, are now standard playbook strategies for corporations worldwide. The trust and the holding company, structures he helped pioneer, remain the fundamental legal vehicles for global business. His story forces us to confront the central dilemma of modern capitalism, the tension between the incredible efficiencies and innovations that large-scale, centrally planned enterprise can produce, and the threats it poses to competition, democracy, and economic fairness. The low prices and stable supplies that his system delivered came at the cost of economic freedom for others. The philanthropic institutions he built have done incalculable good for humanity, yet they also represent a concentration of power over social priorities in the hands of an unelected few. Rockefeller created a world where corporations are more powerful than many nations, where market dominance is a primary strategic goal, and where private wealth holds unprecedented sway over public life. He did not just build a company that sold oil, he engineered the blueprint for the system we all inhabit, a system of immense power, productivity, and inequality, whose rules we still live by and whose consequences we are still grappling with today.